like this right here, good. But if I hear somebody yelling Omaha or touchdown or go, and it doesn't fit in sync with my lesson, I'm going to be suspicious you're on a different channel. There are two teams, Seattle Seahawks, John, Denver Broncos. He said he didn't know which teams. I bet he did this morning as he was making his announcements. That are playing tonight, deciding the Super Bowl championship. They started out with I don't know how many different teams on both the NFL and the AFL series at the beginning of the season practicing. Spending hours each day practicing, spending more hours in team meetings, going over films of opposing teams and their own, seeing things that they need to improve on, things particularly about themselves. Then as the season began, then you can add to that, the schedule, the number of hours they needed to spend in traveling wherever they were going, the number of hours they were playing in each game, in addition to the increased number of hours that they spent in their practices, in their seasons, and on the series goes. Then the regular season ends and playoffs begin. And the teams that seem to be doing better, of course, are going to be spending more hours in practice, more hours watching films, more hours focused on that. All the way down to where they're at today with two teams. I can guarantee you today, if you happen to have turned the TV on, I saw just a quick snippet of Peyton Manning as he was walking through some tunnel, and there was not a smile on his face. Just this, I'm serious about where I'm headed. Suit, dressed nicely, but don't stop me for an interview, I'm going down here. So focused, so intent on winning a Super Bowl. Now after it's over with, yes, there's a Super Bowl ring that each player wins. Some good bragging rights that I'm sure that if I was in that process, somehow that would work into a lot of my conversation. By the way, are you talking about the Super Bowl? I'm sure they'll bring that up on occasions of how they played and won if they did. Opportunity, of course, to get a little additional bump up in the salary for the one that wins, and I guess even the losing team maybe makes some of that. Now, out of all of that, when they get through, it's not near going to compare to what we can do as Christians. And I realize there's some big things in that. And I enjoy watching it. And I get thrilled and excited when somebody can do something phenomenal that I couldn't even begin to do. Especially in football. It's kind of neat. But people like the Apostle Paul, Peter, Jesus, in the things that they did, spent a lot of time on a different focus. It was on a different field, a different arena. After tonight's game, somebody will have a winning season all the way through. And they'll have some things to talk about. But somewhere down the road, after that Super Bowl's over with, things die down. But they'll get to talk about it next year. And then maybe the next and the next. But there's going to come a time when there's really not Super Bowls anymore. What could replace Super Bowl? I don't really know. But there's going to come a time when the United States isn't anymore. And after all of that's done, the only thing that's really lasting are the eternal things. I like being on a winning team, and that's what I want to talk about. But I want to be on a team that carries me to a greater and longer lasting victory than one where I can just wear a ring, brag a little bit about some phenomenal catch or tackle or whatever, and that's all there is. Because there is so much more to being on the right winning team. I'm going to make a parallel to what would be in football and talk about spiritual matters on being on a winning team. Number one, you need to have the desire to win. These guys, as I mentioned, if you saw them today, were focused. But even at the beginning of the season, they were discussing what they were going to do when they got to the playoffs. And when, if possible, they didn't say if possible, when they got to Super Bowl, each one of them, with that focus and that goal in mind. This is what I'm going to do. This is where I want to be. A desire and a passion to do that fed them all the way through the practices, through the meetings, through the pain, through everything else. As a church, as individuals, and as a team of people, we need to have a desire to win for Jesus. Jesus talks in the Sermon on the Mount, Matthew records in chapter 5, "Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness." They don't think it's just a good idea or merely something maybe to shoot for once in a while. But there's a passion within them, a hungering and a thirsting for what is right. And that sets them apart from anybody else. It puts them on the winning team. Other passage that fits real well is one that Paul wrote in Philippians, in chapter 1. He talked about his passion with these words: "For me to live is Christ. And if I die, well, that's gain too." Gain because he's going to see Christ. Now, there are a lot of things that Paul knew how to do. He was a tent maker by trade. He was a Pharisee back before his time of Christianity. And all of those things were either secondary or nothing. Pharisee part, nothing. Tent making, worked his way through occasionally on some missionary journeys. But his real passion, what he lived for, was serving Jesus. Being closer to him. Anything that would give credit to Christ. Anything he could do to bring people to Christ. A desire to win. So much so that later on when he would write some of the things that he did, he would talk about adjustments that he made in life. He didn't have to do those things, but he just did them. And so when he'd be working and trying to do things with the Jews, he said, to the Jews, I became like a Jew. Now, I didn't do everything they did, but he made sure he didn't offend them, that the door was open, that they realized that he could identify with them. So to the Jews, I became to the Jews. Now, to the Greeks, he said, I became like a Greek. I ate what they ate. I did whatever they, Then at the end of that phrase, he said, I became all things to all men. Not just sometimes, but all things to all men, that I might by some means win some. All possible means is what he said. Win some. His goal was different. His passion was different. That's why in a lot of our Bibles you can turn to the end of Revelation, and there's a few more pages in there, some old looking maps. And they've got dots that trace on them. When you get past the first couple of maps of where Jesus has been, or maybe where Moses had tread, and this and that, then there's 3 maps dedicated to 3 missionary journeys that Paul made, this apostle, who was at one point a persecutor of the church. Now his passions changed. And there was no stopping Paul with God on his side. A passion to win. In all likelihood, we exist today as a church because of what Paul did over 2,000 years ago. Think about it. Being on the winning team. Number 2, you have to be aware of a team. We're not individuals. God never meant for us to be individuals. As we said this morning in one of our Bible classes, He didn't put us in caves and say, go off in your corner and pray and don't get touched or contaminated by the world. But He made us a church. And He did that on purpose. Paul talks a lot about it in 1 Corinthians chapter 12. He talks about the church, and he makes it as a parallel. He talks about the body. He says the body has many members. And as he's describing this, he talks about the body and being ears and eyes and whatever, and how they all function differently. But as it got through there, down about verse 18, it says, but God makes each one of them just as He pleased. I like hanging out with the students. I'm not near their age. I'm ancient. I know that. But I like being with them because there's a youthfulness about it. But one of the neat things, too, besides that, is you can see their personalities, and they just love getting along with one another. And they know they're different. But they don't mind that. That's part of the beauty of what they do. And it's great within the church too. And you see, when we recognize the value of our individuality and the uniqueness, but then putting it together, it becomes what God wants us to do. It pleased Him, it excited Him to do it this way, instead of making everybody like Craig. Craig's a good guy. But it'd be kind of boring if we looked out there and saw 100 Craigs out here. Even Craig would get bored with that. And there's so many other things. You see, God intended on making us different so we can enjoy variety, encouragement in a lot of different ways. Someone wrote a long time ago, "No man is an island unto himself." I think that was attributed to Hemingway, but I looked up on the internet today and there was somebody even before that wrote it. We're not meant to be by ourselves. I need the team needs me. I have value just because God made me the way I am. I don't look at myself as being superior. I just look at myself as being one of the ingredients in that team. But I need the team. And the team needs me, and I have to be aware of that. You watch these guys that are out there on these teams that are playing tonight, and they're going to be so conscious of protecting and guarding and doing everything they can to make their plays the way they ought to be. Because they're a team. Ecclesiastes chapter 4, we read just a little bit earlier here at the beginning of services. In verses 9, it says, 2 are better than 1. And I'm not talking about that commercial, which is better. 2 Oreos is better than 1 Oreo, I would say. 2 chocolate chip cookies is even better than 2 Oreos. 2 are better than 1 in relationships, as the wise man goes on and says. Because if one man falls, the other's there to pick him up. I find it interesting that in a football game, that these tough, rugged guys that lift hundreds of pounds of weight and do all these bench presses and leg presses and get out there and run on the field, when they fall over, they reach out like, "Help me up." Now, do you not think that's just a bit strange? I mean, if it's a second grader, okay, but this is a guy that's playing professional football. I think they just kind of like being helped up. We all enjoy that, don't we? Somebody reaching out to hold my hand. 2 are better than 1. Woe to the man who falls when there's no one there to lift him up. And then the last part of that little section says, a threefold strand is not easily broken. If you're holding on to a lifeline, you don't want it to break. You want some strength in it. Remember the team. I'm part of the team. I need to realize that I need the team, and the team needs me. Number 3, as we're talking about this, we got to work to that. We talked about the hours and all that these professional guys put in, all their things. That, you know, one of the greatest quarterbacks that was out, I don't recall his name, but I wrote down the quote back a long time ago. He was an excellent guy in the process of time. He said, if I go back to the locker room at the end of the game, and I don't feel beat up and in pain, then I won't think I've done my job out on the field. Now, if he has that kind of attitude as far as what he needs to contribute to his team, how should we feel? Paul wrote in one of his letters about the suffering and the struggles that he went through. Not so much to brag, but just to say, this is what it's like. And so he'd been shipwrecked. He'd been stoned. He'd been beaten up besides that. He'd been fallen to thieves and so many different things. And you see, Paul got through saying, but it's all worth it, you see. Because when he crosses over, as these guys say, and go back to the locker room at the end of the game, when Paul crosses over, when I cross over, I don't want to go in there and say, oh, don't have any scratches, any bruises to contribute. I've not really done too much. I want to have said I've done my part. I put myself on the line. I have some bruises because of it. but it was worth every bit of it. Made a difference somewhere in somebody's life. Helped somebody to realize they can make it to heaven too. Watch the game. If you don't watch the game, watch some of the little things that go on afterwards that you catch on the news. And see if you don't see some of the things we're talking about. Look on there and see if there's anybody in that arena that doesn't want to be there with a passion. That's happy to be part of the team out there on the field. Look on there and see if you see anybody that's not putting in, as the football players that say 110%, which statistically is impossible. That helps us to make it feel like we're putting in more. Because it's worth it, and they understand that. Notice they don't ask for what they're getting out of it, but rather what's the team getting in that team effort. And then at the end, see if there's not a team rejoicing because they're the winning team. And they might be beaten up and bruised up, but they're the winning team. And they might carry some guys off the field, but they're probably going to give a thumbs up to their teammates like, you keep at it. This is worth it. I want to be part of a winning team. I want to win. I want Central to win. I want the CSC students to win. I want our youth to win. I want our families to win. I want us to win souls. I want us to reach out to communities. This is what God wants. He wants a winning team. Not for our glory, but bragging rights for Him. This is what we're about. A greater victory than carrying home a Super Bowl ring or extra salary. Because when all of those have ended, and they don't even record them anymore because it's not important, the only thing that's going to matter is what you did, spiritually speaking, in this earth. Being part of a winning team makes all the difference in the world. Be part of it. Give your effort to it. Give your desires to it. Know that it makes a difference. And work to that end. And there'll be some great rejoicing, better than you could ever imagine, when we cross over. What a neat thing it'll be, won't it? Close the lesson tonight with an invitation. As you look at your life and what you're up to, where do you stand with God? How much are you putting in? Really? Honestly? And is this fair, really, with God? Now, we're not perfect. I'm not saying that. But if you've turned your back on God, walked away, and get your life right. And if you've just kind of been strolling along and taking it easy, and have a talk with God and ask Him to help you get this over with. If you've done something public, you want to get that right, and come down front. And if you've never made a commitment to God in baptism, Christ, you can do that and have your sins washed away tonight and become a Christian. Do you need to come? Do so while we stand and sing.